tonight, the Premier backtracks on some of the new emergency measures. Playgrounds will be allowed to open, but outside gathering rules will still be enforced. This as police forces across the province say they will not conduct random stops. Plus,
people are really fatigued and really frustrated at this point in time. It just feels like our worlds are getting smaller and smaller.
As restrictions tighten for outdoor spaces, there's disappointment and a lot of confusion. We'll break down what you need to know about the latest changes. And the royal family pays tribute as Prince Philip is laid to rest. We'll take you through the funeral service held to honor the legacy of the Duke of Edinburgh.
This is CBC Saturday News.
Good evening, I'm Marivel Tarouk. Just a day after Ontario announced sweeping new restrictions, changes are being made. The new measures were met with heavy criticism, both that they went too far or not far enough. The CBC's Lorenda Redekop reports.
All playgrounds were supposed to be off limits as of today. But this afternoon, the Premier tweeted they'll be allowed to stay open. Regulations will be amended. This father says it's one of the few spots his family can go to, living in a condo.
I'm just trying to take advantage of the last days because it's hard to keep my daughter inside all the time.
But the province says the rules on other outdoor spaces like sports fields stand.
We're taking decisive action on the ground to dramatically step up enforcement.
During this state of emergency, the province also gave extra powers to police to stop people, ask who they are and why they're out. The Toronto Force is one of many in this province saying it doesn't plan to use this extra power.
So the police are simply saying that please don't put us in that position. We don't want to stop and we won't stop people randomly, but we want you to follow the emergency order that's currently in place.
It doesn't give us any comfort. How can we take the police at their word that if we stop you, it will be for a good reason?
The Canadian Civil Liberties Association says it's launching a legal challenge, comparing this to a so-called driving while black police stop. Late this afternoon, the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police said in a statement that the measures will be modified, and it's waiting to find out what the changes are. All this as critical care data showed a record number of new COVID admissions to ICU, 80 more people in the past day. Many doctors are frustrated.
They really dropped the ball on protecting workers, and that's who we're seeing.
Dr. Brazada describes his shift last night.
It was crazy. We were seeing on average 1 or 2 critical care patients coming in every hour. We would have to put them on high flow oxygen or intubate them. And what's crazy is that we ran out of high flow oxygen machines.
So to be put on oxygen, people had to have a reading of 70% instead of 80%. He says they made it work yesterday, but worries these types of decisions will become much worse. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
As Lorenda mentioned, the OACP says changes are coming, but provincial officials haven't confirmed that. Meanwhile, the executive director of the Civil Liberties Association announced a team will be launching a legal challenge before the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, arguing some of the emergency measures violate some sections of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In a statement, the CCLA says the challenge will be brought forward as quickly as possible and calls the latest restrictions unconstitutional. These concerns are echoed by advocacy groups and community leaders. Robin Maynard, author of Policing Black Lives, says since racialized communities are doing work deemed essential, they would be most affected by any expansion of police powers.
If you look at the realities that Black people, that Indigenous people, that encampment residents have faced at the hands of the police over the past several years, over the past several decades, we need to realize that this mistrust is a rational and reasonable response to the fact that policing is a kind of violence for our communities. So I think that particularly in the context when public health guidance has not told us that people shouldn't be outside, has in fact told us that that's one of the safest things to do. We know that Black communities, because of living because of living often in situations of more crowded housing, having less access to backyards, actually also need to be outside more because it's Black communities and racialized communities, again, that are doing the work that is deemed essential. So that policing is something that is especially going to be experienced by Black communities. It's just, that is the nature of racist policing.
Well, the sweeping new measures have left a lot of Ontarians frustrated, but also confused. Jessica Ng is live at John Chang Park in Leslieville to delve into these restrictions more. So, Jess, just a day after they were announced, there is still a lot to unpack here.
Yes, there definitely is. And it's the third time this month that changes have been made for residents. The biggest changes, they're going to be to the time you spend outdoors. So amenities like golf courses, tennis courts, basketball courts, soccer fields, those are all going to be closed till at least May 20th. And that's when the current stay-at-home order is set to expire.
Now, they do want people to stay at home, of course, but then if you're outside, there are also new limits for gatherings. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, under the new order amendments, you are only allowed to gather with people from your household or a caregiver for someone you live with. So all public, all social gatherings that are supposed to be happening outdoors, they will not be happening until, again, at least May 20th. And as of Monday, weddings, funerals, and all religious ceremonies, those will be capped at 10 people, whether they are indoors or outdoors. And all travel by roads in and out of the province, that will only be essential that will be permitted to continue.
Well, the other thing that people are confused about is the retail situation. So what retail can and cannot be open right now?
Only what's considered essential retail can be open right now. So that includes pharmacies, convenience stores, grocery stores, indoor farmers markets. Those are just a few of those examples. But in those settings, it's going to be a maximum of 25% capacity because they really don't want people congregating indoors.
Now, the Premier has announced that playgrounds will in fact be allowed to open. After that was met with swift backlash.
Yes, thousands of parents took to online petitions and Facebook expressing their concern about the fact that playgrounds had initially been announced to be closed. Now they are going to be open. We've seen that that directive is going to be reversed, but parents and physicians were confused as to why it was made in the first place.
It's kind of depressing that we've got to this point. I think the government's kind of lost track of what they're trying to achieve, and instead they're going to impact a lot of people's mental health.
They're not at school anymore, so they're not exposed to their friends there. And then now they're losing their friends at the park, which...
And enforcing the outdoor activities to be limited basically means that we're asking people to move indoors. And what's going to happen is folks are going to congregate in indoor settings.
So what else are physicians, Jess, saying about the effectiveness of these new preventative measures?
Doctors are saying that some of these measures, they don't actually address the major causes of viral transmission.
We know that the risk of transmission outdoors is not 0%, but it's like getting close. It's really, really, really low risk. If you can separate by 2 meters, your risk of outdoor transmission is like negligible.
Bogosh says it would be more effective to vaccinate people who have to go to work, as workplaces continue to be the driving transmission places in the entire province.
All right, Jess, thanks for helping us digest all of these new changes.
You're welcome.
The Ontario Construction Consortium is calling on the provincial government to reconsider halting non-essential construction.
We think it's unfair. It creates an uneven playing field in the industry, and we think that the province should allow construction to go forward. If it's good enough for residential construction to continue, then industrial, commercial, institutional construction should be allowed to continue also.
While many construction projects fall under the essential category, work at malls, hotels, and office towers has been paused under the new restrictions. Gillies says construction sites are among the safest workplaces to be, due in part to the ability to distance on the job. But data on workplace outbreaks across Toronto shows that might not be the case. Toronto Public Health says of 608 workplace outbreaks since the beginning of the pandemic, just under 59% fall under the category of offices, warehousing, shipping and distribution, and construction. Hundreds of demonstrators took to Toronto's streets today demanding an end to Ontario's current lockdown. The protesters started at Queen's Park, made a loop in the downtown core, and then made their way back to their starting point. Police say officers were on scene, but it's unclear at this point if any tickets were issued. Well, as the race between vaccines and variants continues, some healthcare practitioners are getting creative when it comes to reaching the most vulnerable. The University Health Network recently launched a Homebound vaccine program, bringing vaccines to those who can't easily get to the mass clinics or pharmacies. Our Farah Morali followed along one physician as he brought vaccines to a community on Toronto Island.
This is how Dr. Karim Villani's Saturday begins, picking up a cooler of 8 vaccines.
Today we've had the opportunity to pick up some vaccines from the Toronto Western Family Health Team, and we're going to make our way down to the Toronto Islands to provide some vaccines to individuals who really need it. So off to the ferry. Off to the ferry.
It's a second weekend in a row Villani has traveled to the islands. Today, it's Ward's Island.
A lot of the patients we're seeing are homebound, frail, have certain medical conditions, and there's no way that they can even come to the ferry, get to the city, and get their vaccines. So we're finding ways to deliver vaccines to them.
Villani is part of a group of physicians that is banding together to try to secure vaccines for those in remote and vulnerable communities.
Luckily, we were able to secure a supply of vaccine from UHN, and we're just going to head there today and try to get the vaccine in the arms of our patients.
The clock is ticking. Villani's cooler will give him 6 hours to get vaccines into arms.
Let's go ahead to Hank.
With the help of some local islanders, he can get around pretty quick. One of his first few stops, the home of a 90-year-old woman who was vaccinated last week. Today, it was her daughter's turn, who was her sole caretaker.
1, 2, 3.
Megan Cridlin rolled up her sleeve to get jabbed today and says she is grateful to Villani for coming to her and her mother.
Just been amazing. Getting my mother off of the island, we're talking at least 2 hours, no matter what you're doing, and that's a conservative estimate. It's a huge relief to at least have some protection.
The next stop, the home of 94-year-old Frida Lord, who's lived on the island since 1950. She hasn't left her home since October. Lord is a little camera shy, but was all smiles today.
I've been waiting a long time, and from the news yesterday, I thought, oh, they're in short supply, it'll be another month, but they came today, so I was very pleased.
At the heart of this program, the trust patients have in their own physicians, which is why the UHN says the hope is to expand it.
People that have some concerns or worries about vaccines kind of wait to hear from their primary care provider. And with vaccine expansion coming, the role of family medicine, I think, for a lot of populations who may be reluctant to get a vaccine will expand greatly.
As for Villani, his hope is to return next weekend, so long as he can fill up his cooler with more vaccines. Farah Morali, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, most of Ontario's public health units wasted dozens of COVID-19 vaccine doses last month. But health officials argue that's not the full story. Depending on the syringe being used, extra doses can sometimes be drawn out of the vial. But that's not always possible.
It's awful because I see the people that are trying to get appointments. They are high-risk groups. They are essential workers. Some of them have chronic illnesses, and we can't, get them in that day because we're not able to potentially draw out that extra dose that could, have more people coming through of our clinics. When we hear wastage, and the public may think that it's, York Region is throwing away doses, of course that's not what's happening. It's just that we're trying so hard to get that last drop out of the vial, and if we're not able to, it has to be deemed as wastage.
Extracting additional doses is more difficult with 3 cc syringes, which are shorter and wider than the preferred 1 cc syringes. Wastage can also happen from a mix of manufacturer, equipment, or human error, such as accidentally dropping or puncturing a vial. Despite these setbacks, York Region's Medical Officer of Health says he's not worried.
Given the fact that the so-called wastage is really not true wastage, it actually is our inability to be able to draw out 6 doses from every vial. So I'm not really concerned about the issue of wastage. And I think in the grand scheme of things, the actual numbers of doses are quite small.
CBC News contacted all 34 Ontario public health units to ask why doses were wasted in March. The most common reason was not being able to pull that last dose from the vial. Only one health unit explicitly said it wasted vaccines because it had trouble finding people to immunize. Live look at Ottawa this evening. On Monday, travel checkpoints are set to return at the border between Ottawa and Gatineau, Quebec. This measure is part of the new restrictions announced by the province yesterday. The city's mayor and Ottawa police said yesterday municipal officials were still waiting for details on the checkpoint plan.
We will wait for further details from the province, as I mentioned, on how they will be operationalized and enforced. This includes details around how the border checkpoints will work between Gatineau and Ottawa. These are legitimate reasons for traveling between Quebec and Ontario: work, medical appointments, and the transportation of goods. This is not the time to head to your cottage or to go for a hike in Gatineau Park. There has to be that level of reasonableness, because you can't capture in regulations every single personal reason why someone may have to come across the border. And obviously, if a loved one has passed away, or they're in the hospital, or they need their son or daughter's care, that should be a reasonable reason.
Fire crews dug through debris after a home explosion on Hamilton's West Mountain last night. The fire marshal has now assigned 2 investigators to determine the cause. Multiple calls of loud noise came in at around 10:30 to the area of Bonaventure Drive. There was no visible fire on arrival, but the home was found leveled. At least 3 homes on either end of the scene were damaged and covered in debris. Crews shut the gas meters off after smelling natural gas. Hamilton's fire chief says it's remarkable there are no sustained injuries from the accident.
Stand up, and if you need help, Acorns are with you.
Despite a stay-at-home order in the province, housing advocates with the group Acorn rallied in East York today. The group says 2 35- and 7-story residential buildings are being proposed at 90 Eastdale Avenue, adjacent to an existing 24-story apartment building. And they say the units are not affordable for the low to moderate income families in East York. This comes just days before the City Council holds its final vote on an inclusionary zoning bylaw. If approved, the bylaw would require a portion of all new developments be dedicated to affordable housing units. Still ahead, honoring the life and legacy of Prince Philip. Only 30 members of the royal family were in attendance for the service at Windsor Castle. We'll have more on the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral coming up. The royal family paid tribute to Prince Philip today, honoring the life and legacy of the Duke of Edinburgh with a funeral service at Windsor Castle. Philip's casket arrived in a green Land Rover that he helped design for the ceremony. A procession led by Philip's children and grandchildren followed. More than 700 members of the armed forces took part outdoors, but inside the service was limited to 30 mourners due to COVID-19 protocol, forcing some to sit in isolation, including the Queen. After the ceremony, Philip's coffin was lowered into the royal vault at St. George's Chapel. He died last Friday at the age of 99. And this is Windsor, Ontario this evening. Coming up, Sophia will be here with your forecast for the rest of the weekend. Stay with us. There's a new virtual and outdoor exhibit outside the Fort York Visitor Centre in downtown Toronto. Organizers say the event tells the untold stories of Toronto protests that took place in 2009 against the genocidal war in Sri Lanka.
It was a sustained protest over many months, and at certain days we had over 50,000 people in downtown Toronto. So to be able to take some pride at the level of organizing, the fact that the community didn't sit back and watch what was happening, but fought back and wanted the genocide to stop, is something that we wanted to cherish and remember for years to come.
The exhibit, called An Archive of Action, features interviews, documents, and photographs of the demonstrations, which brought together tens of thousands of Tamil Canadians to the downtown core. Of course, Ontarians are urged to go out only for essential purposes during this provincial stay-at-home order, and that's why the exhibit is also holding digital events over April and May. Sophia's here now with a look at how our forecast is looking.
I hope that you all enjoyed the carbon copy a day that is the showery, the little breaks of sun, and the mostly cloudy-ish day that was Saturday, because you will have a carbon copy day for Sunday. Bang on seasonal, and no griping about not being near the 18 or 20 degree mark like we were over the past week, because things are going to fall very far south down the well for this upcoming long-range forecast. And really make sure you get out and enjoy Monday. It will be by far the best day of this upcoming long-range forecast, mid-teens and even some breaks of sun, because waiting in the wings is this very large draping cold front. Really, it's going to go all the way from Oklahoma to us up in the Great Lakes. It will open the floodgates for a lot of cold air to filter in from the prairies, and this cold Arctic air will mix in with a lot of soupy Gulf moisture. It sets up really the absolute perfect storm track right above us. Now, this is Wednesday I take you to, and have a look at this image. That's a lot of snow. This is something that you'd commonly see in, I don't know, December, January, February, even March. But as we round out the end of April, not so common. Yes, we are talking for the potential of significant shoveling snow for some major population centers around the GTA. North GTA, even Sarnia and London could see the potential of 15 to 25 centimeters of snow midweek. This is still early. This is still very track dependent. There is the possibility, if this storm track moves a little farther to the north, that this could be rather to the south, more of a snow story for those of you in the South GTA as well. Right now, it looks like a little bit of a less snow chance for those of you in Eastern Ontario. But coupled with this winter storm potential is also very winter-like temperatures, about 10 degrees below seasonal for midweeks. So definitely enjoy the showery and seasonal weekend we have at Bay, because coming up, again, that midweek winter storm potential, significant snow swath, heavy, wet spring shoveling snow, and then plunging temperatures in its wake. We'll be talking about this all throughout the forecast in tomorrow's show as well, and how long that cold will last. Maribel.
All right. Thanks, Sophia. And that's our show for you tonight. Thank you for watching. You can stay caught up on news anytime on our website.